So here's the thing about being invisible for 25 years. People forget you're watching. They forget you're listening. They definitely forget you know where the bodies are buried literally. It's 3 a.m. I'm in the archive room. My family pretends doesn't exist. And I've just found proof my stepmother planned my mother's demise. Tomorrow, Dad announces his successor. Tomorrow, Cleo's golden boy gets crowned. But tonight the ghost son found receipts. And I'm about to make a lot of noise. I approached the dining table like I was walking toward an execution. My execution, specifically, though it would be slow death by 1,000 dismissals instead of bullets. Julius Sharp sat at the head of the table, whiskey in hand, looking every inch the aging lion. Silver hair swept back. Custom suit that probably cost what most people make in 6 months. The kind of dangerous stillness that made grown men stutter. Behind him, oil paintings of dead Sharps glared down at us. A gallery of violent men who died violently. To his right, Roman leaned forward, mid-story, his hands gesturing wildly as he described last week's negotiation with a rival crew. So this idiot from the Volkov outfit actually pulls a knife, he laughed. The kind of laugh that comes easy when you've never lost a fight. Like I'm supposed to be scared of 6 inches of steel when I'm holding. Roman, darling, not at dinner, Cleo interrupted. But her tone was pure maternal indulgence, the verbal equivalent of ruffling his hair. She sat beside Julius in an emerald dress that matched her calculating eyes, playing the doting wife and proud mother like she'd been born to the role. She hadn't been. She'd orchestrated her way into it. But 8 hours before I found the file. I didn't know that yet. I just knew the familiar weight of being furniture in my own family. I slipped into my seat at the far end of the table, physically present, socially invisible. The staff had already served the first course. Nobody noticed I'd arrived late. Nobody ever did. The quarterly reports, Julius said, his eyes finally landing on me with all the warmth of a tax audit. You reviewed the offshore accounts? There it was. My singular value reduced to numbers on spreadsheets. Transferred to your secure drive this morning, I said, keeping my voice neutral. 28 years of practice had made me fluent in invisible. Good. He turned back to Roman, dismissing me in the same breath. Now, about tomorrow's ceremony. Cleo's hand touched Julius's arm, a gesture so practiced it looked natural. Darling, maybe you should explain to Jude how tomorrow's ceremony works. Her smile was poisonous, honey. I don't think he's attended a proper power transfer before, being so administrative. The table fell silent. Even Roman had the decency to look uncomfortable, though he hid it by gulping his wine. Administrative. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Not soldier, not enforcer, not heir. A glorified accountant in a family where power came from violence, not spreadsheets. I understand the ceremony, I said quietly. Of course you do, sweetheart. Cleo's voice dripped with theatrical sympathy. You understand everything from that little office of yours. So cerebral. Julius said nothing. He never did. His silence was its own verdict. She's right. You're not enough. You never were. 2 hours later, after they'd toasted Roman's inevitable coronation and ignored me through 3 more courses, I retreated to my wing of the estate, the east corridor, as far from the family quarters as possible, while still being technically in the same building. My mother's photograph sat on my desk where it always did. Lily Sharp. Brilliant, beautiful, gone at 27, the same age I was now. I didn't know yet that her demise had been planned. Didn't know the woman pouring champagne in the dining room had orchestrated it. Didn't know that in 4 hours, I'd find proof in the basement archive. But I knew something was wrong. Had always known. You can feel the shape of a lie even when you can't see it. And tomorrow, when Julius crowned Cleo's son, that lie was supposed to become permanent. I stared at my mother's frozen smile and felt the familiar ache of being erased, of watching the woman who replaced her build an empire on her grave. If I'd known what I'd find in the archive room at 3 a.m., would I have gone looking? Probably. Some truths hunt you down whether you're ready or not. The thing about being the family accountant is that everyone assumes you're harmless, boring, even. They hand you access to everything because numbers don't bite back. At 3 a.m., hunched over my laptop in the basement archive room that smelled like old paper and regret, I was about to prove them catastrophically wrong. I'd been doing my usual routine auditing old legal cases for vulnerabilities, the kind of tedious work that made Roman physically yawn whenever I mentioned it. The estate's entire paper archive had been digitized last month, and I was cross-referencing files when I saw it. A subfolder buried 6 layers deep, encrypted with military-grade security. The label made my stomach drop. Legacy J, sharp only. Now, here's where it gets funny. Well, funny in that deeply horrifying way, where you either laugh or scream. My father, the great Julius Sharp, had used my birthday as the encryption key. The same birthday he'd forgotten for the past 3 years running. The same birthday Cleo always accidentally scheduled important meetings over. The irony was so sharp it could draw blood. The file opened like Pandora's box wearing a cheap suit. First document. Original autopsy report. Cause of death. Acute toxic exposure. Consistent with administered substances. The word administered was underlined 3 times. Someone had changed it in the official records to sudden heart failure. My mother had been 27. Athletes have better odds of spontaneous heart failure than she did. Second document. Witness statements. The gardener remembered seeing the opera singer at the estate 2 weeks before my mother's passing. The housekeeper noted Cleo bringing my mother tea, always tea, multiple times. Mrs. Sharp seemed so weak those final days, she'd written. The new lady was very attentive. Attentive. That's one word for it. Third document. Financial transfers. Julius had paid the private investigator $200,000. The notation read, case closure, personal matter resolved. Resolved. Like my mother was a glitch in the system, instead of a person. But the last document? That's the one that made my hands shake so badly I almost dropped my laptop. A letter from the investigator, dated 3 days before the case officially closed. Mr. Sharp, I'm urging you to reconsider. The evidence is substantial. If you proceed with this relationship, you're bringing the person responsible for your wife's demise into your home, into your son's life. This isn't just negligence, it's betrayal of the worst kind. I read it 3 times. 4, 5. My entire life suddenly made horrible, perfect sense. Cleo hadn't just married into the Sharp dynasty. She'd eliminated the competition, seduced the widower, and spent 25 years systematically erasing me, the only person who had a legitimate claim to stop her son from inheriting everything. Every dismissal, every humiliation, every time she'd called me cerebral or administrative while pushing Roman into the spotlight. It wasn't cruelty. It was a strategy. She'd been neutralizing the threat since I was 3 years old. I sat there in the archive room, surrounded by filing cabinets full of family sins, and started laughing. Quietly at first, then louder. The kind of laugh that's one breath away from being a completely different sound. Tomorrow, my father was going to crown her son. Not anymore. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below and please subscribe as the story unravels. The Sharp Estate's grand ballroom looked like a wedding and a funeral had a baby, and that baby grew up to launder money, crystal chandeliers, black marble floors, and enough designer suits to bankrupt a small nation. The syndicate's ruling families filled the space with the kind of dangerous elegance that comes from generations of getting away with everything. Cleo stood at the center of it all like she was born for this moment. Which, technically, she was just not in the way anyone thought. She'd orchestrated the entire ceremony with the precision of her opera days. Dramatic lighting, perfectly timed entrances. Even the flower arrangement screamed legitimate dynasty. Nothing suspicious here. She wore crimson, naturally, bold, confident. The color of someone who'd already won. Roman stood beside Julius on the raised platform, looking like a cologne advertisement came to life. Custom Italian suit, hairstyled to calculated perfection, that easy smile that made people forget he once broke a man's arm over a parking space. He was the picture of an heir apparent. Strong, visible, undeniably sharp. And me? I was exactly where I'd always been. Invisible. They'd stuck me with the technical team, managing the digital displays and vote tabulation. Administrative duties, Cleo had said that morning with her signature poisonous sweetness. You're so good with computers, Jude. We need someone reliable behind the scenes. Behind the scenes. The story of my life, really. Except tonight, behind the scenes was exactly where I wanted to be. I'd spent 12 hours preparing. Not sleeping, not eating, just coding and planning and triple-checking every detail. The old guys in the syndicate liked to pretend they were tech-savvy, but most of them still called IT when their email disappeared. They definitely weren't watching the shy consigliere managing the presentation software. Their mistake. Julius began his speech about legacy and strength, about passing the torch to a new generation. Roman stood taller, Cleo's smile could have powered the entire city grid. The room watched, rapt, as history prepared to repeat itself. I clicked a button. For exactly 3 seconds, the massive screen behind the platform changed. Not to the Sharp family crest like it was supposed to. Not to Roman's accomplishments slideshow. To a photograph. My mother, Lily Sharp, 26 years old, standing in this exact ballroom, in almost the exact spot where Cleo now stood. Young, brilliant, alive. Before the tea, before the heart failure, before she became a convenient tragedy. 3 seconds. That's all I gave them. Then I corrected the error, bringing up the proper display. My fingers flew across the keyboard like I was frantically fixing a technical glitch. Sorry, I muttered into my headset. Wrong file. Fixed now. Julius barely paused his speech. Roman didn't even notice. Cleo's smile never faltered, but the old guard noticed. I watched Silas Burke, my father's oldest friend, straighten in his seat. Watched Margaret Chen, who'd been at my parents' wedding, lean toward her husband and whisper something sharp. Watched 3 other family heads exchange glances that said the same thing. Did you see that? The ghost in the machine had just spoken, and we were only getting started. The voting process in the syndicate was supposed to be sacred, democratic, even. If you ignored the decades of blackmail, strategic favors, and thinly veiled threats that shaped every decision. Cleo had spent 25 years building her coalition vote by vote, favor by favor, until Roman's coronation was less an election and more a coronation wrapped in procedural theater. The ballots were digital now, progress, Julius called it, but the result was already written in stone. Everyone knew it. Roman knew it. Cleo definitely knew it. She stood beside the platform, radiating the quiet confidence of someone watching their masterpiece come to life. Julius began the official count, his voice carrying the weight of finality. By the authority granted to me as Dawn, and with the consent of the assembled families, we now. I stood up, not dramatically, not with a flourish. Just stood, in my boring suit, from my boring technical station in the back, and spoke 3 words that made the entire room freeze. I invoke evidence. You could have heard a pin drop. Actually, you could have heard a pin thinking about dropping and then deciding against it. Julia stopped mid-sentence. Roman's smile faltered like a glitching video. And Cleo, beautiful, composed, untouchable. Cleo went absolutely still, in a way that made predators look relaxed. Jude, my father said slowly. This isn't the time for right of evidence, I repeated, louder this time. Ancient syndicate law. Any blood family member can present material evidence of unfitness before succession is finalized. I'm presenting. The older family started murmuring. They remembered the old laws. Silas Burke actually smiled, the absolute legend. This is absurd, Cleo's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Julius, he's desperate. This is a sad attempt to. The law is clear, Margaret Chen said from her seat, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. If he invokes, he presents. Those are the rules we all live by. I didn't wait for permission. My fingers moved across the laptop, and the screen behind the platform lit up with a document I'd spent all night scanning and enhancing. Private Investigator Report. Lily Sharp. Status. Suspicious death. Investigation required. The date was burned into everyone's vision. 27 years ago. 2 weeks before Cleo and Julius got married. The room didn't explode. It imploded. Whispers became shouts, became absolute chaos. Julius's face went from tan to chalk white in 3 seconds flat. Roman looked between me and our father like someone had just explained that gravity was optional. But Cleo, for the first time in 25 years, her mask cracked. Just a hairline fracture, barely visible, but I saw it. The flash of rage, the calculation, the recognition that the invisible sun had just become very, very visible. That report was discredited, she said, but her voice had lost its music. Julius, tell them this is ancient history. A tragedy you investigated thoroughly. Did you, though? I asked, still standing, still calm. Because the file says, investigation required. Not investigation completed. Just required. Julius said nothing. He just stared at the screen like it was showing him his own ghost. The vote was no longer a formality, and the ghost son had finally learned to scream. Cleo transformed before our eyes like some kind of tragic heroine in Act 3. The steel disappeared. replaced by trembling vulnerability that would have won her an award if this were still the opera stage. Tears, actual tears, gathered in her eyes as she pressed a hand to her chest. This is... Her voice broke perfectly. This is a desperate, cruel attack from a son who has never accepted me, who has resented me since the day I tried to love him. Oh, she was good. 25 years of practice made perfect. Julius, she turned to my father, tears now tracking down her face in cinematically perfect lines. Tell them this is ancient history, a tragedy we moved past together. Tell them how you investigated thoroughly, how you found peace, how we built this family from grief. Enough, Julius's voice cut through the room like a gunshot. He stood, shoulders squared, the Don reasserting control. This ceremony will continue. The matter of my first wife's passing was resolved 27 years ago. Jude, sit down. And there it was, the moment I'd expected and dreaded in equal measure. My father choosing her. Again. But the syndicate doesn't work on paternal authority alone. With respect, Don Sharp. Silas Burke stood, and when Silas stood, people paid attention. The right of evidence was invoked. The law is older than any of us. Either the boy presents his full case, or he's expelled for false accusation. The room went dead silent. Expulsion was a polite word for a very impolite ending. Margaret Chen stood next. Then, Vincent Torres. Then 3 more family heads. The old guard. The ones who remembered the actual rules before everyone got soft with PowerPoints and quarterly reports. Full evidence, Margaret said flatly. Or exile. Julius looked at me with something I'd never seen before. Fear. Not of me, of what I might say next. I opened my mouth to respond. Roman hit me so hard I tasted copper. The punch came from my blind side. All 200 pounds of golden boy rage. We crashed into the technical station, laptops and cables flying. The syndicate families scrambled back, forming an instant arena because apparently we were doing this now. You jealous piece of... Roman swung again. I ducked. 25 years of being invisible taught you to see attacks coming. I drove my elbow into his ribs, tactical, precise, targeting the floating rib like the self-defense manuals taught. He grunted, shocked. Administrative, huh? I said, dodging another swing. Cerebral? He charged like a bull. I sidestepped, letting his momentum carry him into a marble pillar. The crack echoed, not sure if it was the pillar or his shoulder. Here's the thing about Roman. He fought like someone who'd always won. Aggressive, showy, assuming intimidation would do half the work. I fought like someone who'd had nothing to lose for 25 years. He grabbed my collar, slammed me against the wall. My vision sparked. He pulled back for another hit, the kind that ends conversations permanently. Enough! Julius's roar stopped Roman's fist mid-swing. Our father crossed the room in 4 strides, physically separating us with the kind of strength that reminded everyone why he'd been Don for 30 years. Roman stumbled back, breathing hard, blood on his knuckles, mine. Probably. I straightened my jacket, tasting blood, feeling my eye already swelling, but I was smiling, because every single person in that room had just watched the coward accountant hold his own against the golden heir. Cleo's performance was officially ruined. Comment, Team Jude, or Team Roman below. Who do you think wins this war? Julius declared a 48-hour recess with all the gravity of a man trying to hold a grenade together with duct tape and hope. For cooler heads to prevail, he announced. Jude will remain in his quarters for his own safety. His own safety. Right. Like being locked in a cage made you safe from the lion circling outside. 2 guards escorted me back to the East Wing like I was a flight risk. Which, fair, I absolutely was. But they deposited me in my rooms, locked the corridor access, and left me with nothing but my thoughts and the absolute certainty that Cleo had 48 hours to make me disappear before I could present evidence that would destroy everything she'd built. I gave myself 36 hours, maximum. She was efficient like that. The knock came at 2 a.m. 3 soft raps that somehow sounded expensive. I opened the door to find Silas Burke standing there with a bottle of scotch that probably cost more than my car, and an expression that suggested he knew exactly how monumentally screwed I was. Your guards take bribes remarkably well, he said, walking past me into my sitting room like he owned it. Which, given his weapons empire, he probably could. We need to talk about your mother. I closed the door. You knew her. I was the best man at their wedding. Silas poured 2 glasses without asking. Lily was brilliant, sharp as a blade and twice as precise. She could calculate profit margins in her head faster than our accountants could with computers. And she was kind, which in this family is basically a terminal diagnosis. He handed me a glass. I was there the week before she passed. Saw Cleo hanging around, all wide eyes and tragic opera songs. Then Lily got sick. Then she was gone. Then suddenly Julius was remarried and everyone just moved on. He took a long drink. I suspected, never spoke up. That makes me complicit, and I've carried that for 27 years. Why are you here now? Because I won't let him erase her twice. Silas set down his glass with finality. And because you're about to be erased too if we don't move fast. We worked through the night. Silas had connections I didn't, neutral families who owed him favors, digital security experts who owed him their lives, and a deeply personal vendetta against people who thought they could rewrite history. We created a dead man's switch. The full evidence, every document, every financial transfer, the investigator's letter, witness statements, all of it uploaded to a secure server with automated distribution protocols. If I didn't check in every 12 hours, it auto-released to every major syndicate family simultaneously. She can't bury what she can't catch, Silas explained, typing with the focused intensity of someone who'd spent decades in the weapons trade. You're basically a walking hand grenade now. She pulls your pin. She explodes too. By sunrise, it was done. Backed up in 7 different locations, distributed across 3 continents, encrypted but queued for immediate release. Cleo could still try to eliminate me, but now it would be suicide. I looked at Silas, this dangerous old man who'd carried guilt for 27 years and finally found a way to make it right. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, he said, standing to leave. You've got 40 hours before you have to walk back into that room and destroy your family. Thank me if you survive it. He paused at the door. Your mother would be proud of you, kid. You're fighting like she would've. Then he was gone, and I was alone with my dead man's switch, and the absolute certainty that the next 2 days would determine whether I became the syndicate's salvation or its most spectacular implosion. The conservatory at 4 p.m. was all golden light and expensive plants that required more care than most people's children. Cleo stood among the orchids and ivory silk. No tears, no performance, just cold calculation. You're smarter than I gave you credit for, she said without preamble. That dead man's switch with Silas? Elegant. I underestimated you. You've been underestimating me since I was 3. Fair. She poured tea. The irony wasn't lost on me, and slid a cup across the glass table. I didn't touch it. She smiled. I'm not that predictable, darling. Besides, you're too valuable alive now. Get to the point. You don't want the Empire. You never did. She pulled out a tablet, swiped through documents. Offshore accounts. 30 million to start. Territory, pick any city that's not Chicago. Roman gets the title. Julius keeps his dignity. You keep your life and your comfort. Let me make sure I understand, I said slowly. You orchestrated my mother's demise. You spent 25 years systematically destroying me, and now you think I want money. Everyone wants something. I want the truth. I want Father to know what he married. I want Roman to know his crown is covered in my mother's blood, and I want you to lose everything. Exactly the way Mom did. The silence could have frozen hell. Cleo set down her teacup with a click that sounded like a trigger. You think you're the hero of this story? Her voice had lost all its music. You're the ghost, Jude. Ghosts disappear. If you present that evidence, I'll make certain Julius knows you're planning to overthrow him, that this is a coup disguised as justice. He'll eliminate you himself. He won't believe you, won't he? I've had 25 years to build credibility. You've had 25 years of being the disappointment. Who do you think he trusts? She walked past me, paused at the door. 30 million, Jude. Freedom. Life. Or play hero and discover that heroes in this family get buried next to their principals. Julius called the family meeting in his private study at midnight. No syndicate families. No guards. Just the 4 of us in a room that suddenly felt 3 sizes too small. We're going to resolve this civilly, my father said. Pouring whiskey like this was a normal Tuesday. Jude, you're understandably emotional. And even if there were irregularities in your mother's investigation 27 years ago, Cleo isn't on trial here. This is about succession, not ancient history. Ancient history. He actually said ancient history. Something inside me that had been locked away for 25 years exploded. You want to talk about succession? Fine. Let's talk about how you asked about quarterly reports exactly once at family dinners. Let's talk about how you put me in the East Wing, physically separated like I was contaminated. Let's talk about every single time she called me cerebral, administrative, too soft. And you just nodded along like she was describing the weather. Julius opened his mouth. I didn't let him. You didn't just let her erase Mom. You helped her erase me. Every dismissal. Every time you chose her performance over your own son's humanity. Tomorrow, when I show the syndicate what you really are, not a Don, just a man so desperate for comfort. He married his wife's demise and spent decades pretending it was love. You'll finally understand what invisible feels like. The room went dead silent. Roman stared at Cleo with an expression I'd never seen. Something between horror and recognition. Mom, his voice cracked. Did you do it? Was Jude's mother? Roman, don't be ridiculous. Answer the question. He was on his feet. All that golden boy certainty crumbling. Because if he's right, if you actually, then everything I am, everything I thought I earned. Cleo said nothing. Roman looked at me, then her, then Julius, who couldn't meet anyone's eyes. I'm not the heir, Roman whispered. I'm the weapon you sharpened to finish what you started. Cleo's mask finally, completely, broke. You were supposed to be king. The truth was finally, devastatingly, visible. The syndicate reconvened 48 hours later in absolute silence. You could feel the tension like electricity before a storm. Every major family sat in judgment, waiting to see if the ghost son would actually deliver, or if this was the most elaborate self-destruction in syndicate history. I delivered. Documents projected on the screen in devastating sequence. The original autopsy report with administered substances underlined 3 times. Witness statements about Cleo's tea deliveries. Financial transfers $200,000 to close an investigation. The investigator's final letter warning Julius he was inviting danger into his home. Then the recordings. Silas had kept them for 27 years, waiting for this moment. Audio of Julius telling the investigator to make it disappear. Video of Cleo at the estate 2 weeks before my mother's passing, already moving through rooms like she owned them. The evidence wasn't just irrefutable, it was surgical. Cleo sat frozen, her performance finally over. Roman looked like someone had explained that gravity was actually optional, and he'd been living a lie. Julius aged a decade in 30 minutes. When I finished, the silence was absolute. Then Cleo moved. The gun appeared from somewhere in her designer dress, small, elegant, probably Italian. She raised it with the same graceful precision she'd applied to everything else, aiming directly at my chest. If I'm ending, she said, voice finally stripped of all music. You're coming with. Julius caught her wrist. For 27 years, he'd chosen comfort over truth, denial over justice, her lies over his own son's humanity. But in that moment, watching her about to end what was left of his actual bloodline, something finally, devastatingly woke up. The shot went wide. The struggle was brief. The ending was inevitable. When Julius stepped back, Cleo was on the marble floor, and the woman who'd orchestrated her way into a dynasty was just another cautionary tale about ambition. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Julius looked at his hands like they belonged to someone else. For Lily, he whispered. But we all knew it was for himself, an execution of his own 27 years of willful blindness. The syndicate turned to Roman. Exile, Julius said before anyone could speak. For his mother's crimes. For Lily's sake. We all knew it was guilt talking, but the old families nodded. Roman was escorted out with nothing, no title, no inheritance, no legacy. The golden son reduced to fool's gold in one ceremony. Then they turned to me. The evidence is clear, Margaret Chen said. Jude Sharp is the legitimate heir. I let the moment breathe. Let them think I wanted the throne. Then I smiled. I refused the title of Dawn, but I'll accept Shadow Consigliere, the position my mother would have wanted. Strategic oversight, no ceremonial target on my back. The room erupted in whispers, but Silas was already nodding, and the old guard understood. Real power doesn't need a crown. Julius would remain as figurehead, a haunted puppet. I would become the syndicate's true architect. 1 year later, I stood in the archive room installing a memorial. My mother's photograph, her real death certificate, and a plaque. Lily Sharp, 1970 to 1997. Justice delayed, never denied. The invisible son had become the empire's keeper of truth, transforming a dynasty built on buried secrets into one that remembered its ghosts. I'd learned the most powerful thing wasn't being seen, it was deciding what everyone else sees. Across the city, Roman's name was being erased from family documents, his wing of the estate already reassigned. I allowed myself one sardonic smile. 25 years of being nothing had prepared me to become everything. The ghost had learned to haunt back. Please subscribe so you never miss our next story. Thank you.